Welcome to the last session of the day, going bottom up, nurturing university leaders of the future. Let me apologize on behalf of Professor Armin. He couldn't make it today. There have been some emergency at his home. I am Professor Anamika Srivastava. I teach economics at Jindal Global University and also look at education policy as my area of research. So I'll be moderating this session today. We are going to discuss a very, very important and relevant topic regarding nurturing university leaders of the future. And just to sort of start with some of the introductory remarks by myself, this is not a very normal time. This is a time of obviously a crisis. Universities are struggling for continuity, just to carry on with their business as usual, teaching, research, community engagement, the usual mission of universities. But we know that there have been people who have been joining universities. There have been teachers, young faculty members, possibly with some sort of some sort of a goal of becoming future leaders. They were in their formative years. Those who are joining in 2020 or before that, or maybe those who are joining us this year. The formative years have been sort of like disturbed because of the pandemic. They are not inside the building. They are working from home. They are sort of like, the usual challenges of working from home, working, online, adjusting to the new sort of a pedagogic environment. At the same time, also thinking of administration, a lot of the young faculty members today have actually taken up the role of administrative managers as well. So what we call in the literature academic managerialism, or managers, those who are also looking at some of the departments, some of these different sort of enterprises of the university, right from outreach to, let's say, international office. Faculty members are trying to sort of represent themselves. Apart from the academic responsibilities, admin responsibilities are on them. The thing is that with performative pressure, or let's say the pressure of publication and etc., you do have your academic inputs that you need to put in, and you need to sort of show those output in terms of publications, in terms of your teaching and learning feedback, and as well as sort of managing that with some administrative responsibility. The idea is that the environment has changed. We have our role models today. We have these university leaders today, the vice chancellors of today. They've been our sort of like, they set the benchmark. But we need to understand that the environment has changed today for the young faculty members. We have no longer have the liberty of enough resources. Universities are under pressure, austerity pressure. Pandemic has created another layer of difficulty. And with that, we do have the new environment of performativity. We've got like to show our output, and we need to sort of, and these are some genuine objectives that the faculties of today need to sort of focus upon. Now, as we nurture universities leader of the future in these set of factors, there have been certain issues that we need to discuss. The going bottom up, therefore, becomes a very relevant issue. Today, those who are serving at sort of middle level management, or let's say lower management level in the university, how do we nurture them for the future as future leadership? What would be the characterization of that leadership, and what should be the principles, the ethics, and how to make leadership of the university authentic? So I'll start this discussion with very, very distinguished panelists that we have here with us. Dr. George, former President, American Association of Community Colleges, United States of America. We have Professor Susan Lee, Vice Chancellor, University of Hull, United Kingdom. We have Ms. Ravneet Pawha with us, Deputy President, Global Engagement and CEO, South Asia, Deakin University, Australia. We also have Colonel G.Thiruvasagam, who is the Vice Chancellor, Academy of Maritime Education and Training and President, Association of Indian Universities, India. So let me start with possibly Professor Susan. What is your first reflection on the issues that I've just raised?
Thank you, Anamika. Well, you've certainly encapsulated well all the challenges that we face as university leaders in this current time, and the really important issue of nurturing leadership through the organization. I think you've put that very succinctly. And one of the challenges I think we have is connecting with those faculties. So leading a university is an immense privilege. As you've described, what we do in universities is make a difference. What are we here for? We're transforming individual lives. We're positively impacting society through our research, through our education, our knowledge exchange, and engaging with the community. But you rightly say that there are enormous amounts of pressures on our faculty, particularly the junior faculty. And we know too that the pandemic has been unequal in its impact. So for example, we know that many women have been at home with children struggling even more to do those things. And that's not to say that hasn't impacted some men as well, but there have been unequal impacts of the pandemic, which puts a further gloss on it. So I suppose for me, managing that as a leader, there are two key elements. On the one hand, we are a charitable institution, if you like. We are an institution that is about education and an academic mission. But on the other hand, as you correctly said, we're also a business. We have to have a mind to the financial sustainability of the university and the importance of that for its future, and indeed the future of the faculty within it. So we have to lead in a way which draws those faculty in, which is engaged, which is connected, which is nurturing, but at the same time is very clear about the purpose of the institution and the resilience of both that institution, but also the individuals within it. And I think that's part of what I'm looking forward to in the discussion today, is how we begin to tease out some of those things. So I'll stop there and let others speak, but thank you.
Thank you, Susan, for that. And I think it is very important to sort of realize that pandemic has been unequally sort of like some people have disproportionately felt the burden more than the others. So that has to be sort of realized. Yes. So can we just, Professor George, if we can sort of hear your views on the question that I've raised?
Sure. Well, I think you mentioned that this is an unusual time, a very unique time for us. We have this tradition in higher education to be collaborative and collegial and take our time to make decisions. But during time of crisis, as we've seen during the pandemic, leaders have had to act more quickly. And there have been unprecedented challenges. A number of our faculty needed to be developed and educated about how best to teach remotely. Faculty who were used to teaching face-to-face classes now found themselves having to face a new world of virtual instruction. So that leaders had to spend a bit of effort and time to bring their faculty into this new environment. And also the students. In the US, a number of our students dropped out of college and universities because of this new environment. They may not have had the technology or the ability to be able to participate. So leaders had to find ways to help students. And that included distributing equipment and opening up areas where Wi-Fi could be accessible for students. The enrollment drop in the United States has been uneven by race and economic status. So leaders are now scrambling with how do we bring these students back into higher ed. So it is a new environment, one where leaders may not necessarily have the time to be as collaborative and collegial as they have in the past, and need to act more quickly and need to focus on the mission and focus on helping our faculty and students.
Thank you very much, Professor George, for that. And I think the point that you raised about the fact that we need to also guide our students. Ultimately, they're also our future leaders. Possibly some of them would be acquiring that role. And also, it is not just about like sort of inculcating lofty principles or ideas or doing bigger things, but providing them with basic infrastructure like Wi-Fi to begin with. So sort of like, bring us back to the very basic questions. So I would now take this question to Professor, Ms. Ravneet, who is with us, what are your initial thoughts on the questions that we've raised?
So, Anamika, I agree with my colleagues, both Susan and George. I think extremely unprecedented times, and for leaders, it's even difficult because, I mean, leadership is the position that is responsible for setting strategic directions. And I think in times like this, it's a huge call to take into account all that is happening in the world, both for students, for faculty, and for the general society, I think, at large. Um, Leadership is also about creating and nurturing, an intellectually vibrant, ethically sound, and a financially stable environment, and an ecosystem that promotes education with cutting-edge research. And I think that we, as leaders, have found it extremely difficult to deal with those aspects of running institutions because of the way overnight, people had to just get to remote teaching and learning. And then with the pandemic, the impact, to social lives, to economic lives, and to personal lives, taking into account all of that, it has been a tough call. Um, in a university, the leadership must be able to develop an environment where there are ideas that can be pursued with passion. And again, the challenge has been for education leadership to continue to deal with that. People with young families have found it extremely hard to work from home. People with, who've not been able to travel to meet their families have been extremely difficult situations to deal with. So all in all, what I'm trying to say is that as leaders, we found it extremely hard to deal with financial situations, of course, personal situations, social situations, in the context of universities. And universities are large places. For example, at Deakin, we have people from 49 other countries. Now, to manage that culturally diverse, and Susan and George will agree with me that is, and our professor from India will agree, it's a difficult task because people come, with certain expectations. And for example, students have been stuck in India, not able to go to the countries where they are studying. Now, how does one deal with that situation? In this wake of COVID-19, transformation has been an important part of our lives in every way. And I think that as leaders, we've extremely been careful to deal with the different situations at people's homes and families, but at the same time trying to run institutions from a leadership position. So the ultimate objective is to create an ecosystem which is sustainable, vibrant, and economically sound. And I hope the worst is over, and I do hope that we are on path of recovery.
Absolutely, Ravneet. Hopefully. But people are talking about third wave and whatsoever, a fight between vaccine and variations and so on and so forth. Anyway, so the point that I think one takeaway from your discussion was the idea of heterogeneity of experiences, that we need to understand that people have been, I mean, their contexts are different, people are different, and therefore their experiences have been different with respect to how pandemic has played out in their personal life, and obviously social and economic concerns are equally important. I'll now move on to Professor Thiruvasagam, and let's hear from from our colleague from India. Yes.
Well, I do totally endorse the previous panelists. Basically, it's a challenge to me as a Vice Chancellor of 16 years of experience. I always have the pride and proud I am the Vice Chancellor for the last 16 years. No, we cannot. Now the time has come to go for self-evaluation. Are you a successful Vice Chancellor even during pandemic? That's a very big question. Okay. As you know pretty well, education should be man-making and society-making process. Both the end, we are not able to carry out and to give contribution to the individual and to the society as well. Yeah. Mahatma Gandhi, the father of the nation, once said, the destiny of any nation is shaped in the classrooms. Now there is no classroom at all. Basically, in India, we enjoy certain advantages also out of this pandemic. Before pandemic, March 2020, almost more than 60% of our teachers didn't have any idea about making use of technology, of conducting classes even online as well. Thanks to this pandemic, now almost all our teachers are very much well trained how to make use of the technology and conducting classes. It's the same case with the students as well. Unfortunately, as said by a professor from California, they are very much blessed that all facilities are available there for the students and faculty in the campus. In India, almost more than 30% of the students live in very remotest part of India in villages. They find it difficult to get the Wi-Fi connection and the networking connection. Most of the time, they are not able to attend the classes. Not only attending classes, even to attend the examination as well. That's a pathetic situation right now we face. How a leader of today can manage. Moreover, India is unfortunate for one more thing as well. After several years, India government introduced National Education Policy 2020, brought out with a lot of innovations and advised us to go for change of curriculum in a bigger way as well. Yes, all that document is in paper. We are not able to introduce any innovation at this moment, all because of this pandemic situation. So as a leader, what I want, as a leader of education institutions of, universities, the leader of the university in the capacity of a vice chancellor has to take up this noble role with dedication and involvement. This is the dire need of an hour, more particularly during this pandemic situation. University are the direct representatives of government to shape the destiny of a nation. Yes. See, I think our friends will agree, India is the second largest country in the world, having the biggest infrastructure of higher education. And the overall aim and objective of higher education of India is providing employable education. Now, a very big, problem has come to reach the objective of providing employable education. Students of arts and science, of course, they attend classes and get the degree. But the students of professional, take my case, my university, Maritime University. In Maritime, almost 90% are practical. They have to go for sailing. They have to attend a lot of laboratory classes. For a kind information, I have sent out one batch of students, but not with a degree, but with a certain certificate of passing theory only. So as a leader, I don't find any alternative to give them degree and make them to be available or eligible to get a job in India and abroad as well. So it is the duty of all leaders of the university to think differently and redesign the curriculum and make use of technology in a way we can use it on any situation, including pandemic situation as well. Then only you can be a successful leader and leader forever as well. It is my opinion.
Yes, Professor Srivastava, I think that was very, very important, and especially the idea of seeing pandemic as the opportunity of catching up on technology, and this, the sort of like the way we had to quickly shift our base online and learn a lot of skills. Although we need time to sort of, really become experts and understand the scope of the technology that we're using at the moment. I think the next question that I would now like to raise is about the idea of um, our university, and when it comes to university leadership, can we think of universities as a typical corporate organization or a business organization, or are there specificities about the university that we need to understand? And it is the same point that I'm trying to raise, when I talked about the sort of managerial tendencies that we see today in the universities, and that's sort of seen as sort of an ethics or norms which should be followed, instead of being obviously there has been a lot of backlash from the faculty members, and they would like to resist some of those corporate governance which is now coming into the university system. So are there any specific, maybe if it could be like, maybe we can start with Professor Susan about, do you think universities are different from corporates, and we need some sort of a specificities when it comes to university governance system and nurturing leaders for the future?
Sorry, I couldn't come off mute. My apologies. So that is such an enormous question that you're asking, isn't it? And I think there are differences. For me, I believe that there are differences between universities and other corporate organizations, a bit because of what I was saying at the beginning, which is that we are also charities, we are also educational institutions and research institutions, and we have a mission around that activity. But I think you're right in saying that it's a difficult balance when you are leading a university and managing your people, if I can put it in those terms, because you were right in your introductory remarks to say that performativity and the importance of outputs has really grown and risen over recent times, as indeed has been the keen eye on the financial sustainability of universities. And as leaders, we are trying to juggle those two things. And it's not easy, as my colleagues have said. I think for me, if I can take this from a slightly different angle, there are certain qualities that we need to bring into the fore as leaders here. And for me, it's about integrity. So what I've tried to do at the University of Hull, and this is my approach, and others will have different ones, and it might not equally always be right, but it's about integrity for me. It's about trying to explain to colleagues, and other of my colleagues used those words of connected, collaborative communication about why we're doing what we're doing and how we're doing what we're doing and what their role is in that strategy, so that everybody feels a part of that strategic mission and can understand what their role in it is. So I think I've spent, well, at the beginning of the pandemic, I probably spent 40% of my time communicating with staff. I made videos, I sent e-bulletins twice a week. I met with people online, I had coffees, whatever it was, to try and explain why we had moved, for example, into more of a command and control style of leadership than what would hitherto have been a rather more engaged and facilitative style of leadership, because that was what was needed. And I think that communication and that cascading through the organization is absolutely critical. But what that turns on is investment in your leadership all the way through the organization, so that message is consistent and clear, and that people feel valued and respected and understand what their role is within that strategy and can feel fulfilled and positive about the role that they're playing through the work that they do to achieve that and feel part of a community. So there are a lot of things in there for me, but it's trying to get that ethos, if you like, running through the institution. So those are my first thoughts to start us off, perhaps.
Yes, Susan, actually it was like music to my ears, sorry for being emotive. And I like the idea of using the right words. When it comes from the leadership, the language also plays a very important role. Especially, we receive emails, videos, as you said. As faculty member, I'm putting this point across that as you said, integrity, connected, collaboration. These are like, these are words which sort of has a vibe of trust and where you want to sort of put in your extra effort during the time of such time of pandemic or crisis as well. Yes, Professor George, do you have anything to say on this?
Yes, well, I agree very much with Susan that you need to focus on what the missions are. The mission in the corporate world is financial profit, and I think unfortunately sometimes it's short-term financial profit because of the pressure of owners and stockholders. Whereas in education, our mission is student learning and teaching and research, human service kinds of activities are important for us. So our culture in higher education has been to be more collegial and consultative and collaborative. But as I mentioned earlier, in times of crisis, leaders cannot be as collaborative and consultative as they would like to be. and often have to become more autocratic just to tackle the challenges of the crisis. Even in normal times, I think we need to focus on the efficiency of our operations, and we need to be responsive. If there are needs that develop for us to do particular kinds of research or particular kinds of new curricula, we need to be responsive. We can't tie things up into collaborative committee processes for too long. So I think we can learn some things from business and industry in the corporate world, but remember that our mission is a different one.
Absolutely. So we take the middle path. I mean, yeah, so that makes a lot of sense. Yes, Ravneet, would like to hear from you.
So I think, Anamika, I totally agree with George and with Susan that universities are really large organizations, because on one side we've got the faculty and the staff of the university, and on the other side we've got the students. And I think as a leader, you're responsible for the entire university, and to think from that perspective itself is a huge task. And universities are about creating and nurturing and building citizens of tomorrow, which I think is a huge focus of institutions around the world. And for leaders to be able to do that in the best possible way is very different from running a corporate organization. Even if it's a large organization, corporates, at the end of the day, the bottom line does matter, whether you're in the black or in the red. Yes, there are organizations that take care of their people. There are organizations that have great HR policies, but you're not playing with the world. You're not playing with lives. Whereas in universities, you're impacting lives, you're creating lives, and you're responsible for lives of the future. So to me, I think that's the biggest task. And then creating this ecosystem about research that makes a difference, and education that creates the tomorrow, I think, again, brings us to the point about how different universities are, and to develop an environment which can build ideas, create people to do different things, and to do it with passion, I think is a tougher task. Yet, like Susan said, it is important to keep the financial angle in mind, because if you're not a financially stable institution, it's very unlikely that you could do different things and go different places. So for the leadership in higher education, I think the difference is about the impact we create and the progress, and the focus that we create, and all stem to great ideas. Leadership in the university is known to be creative, innovative, developing ideas, exploration, testing, challenge, translating, applying. All these words become important. And again, collaborative, and to be able to do this with different parts of the world, when you have people from all over the world looking at you as a knowledge and a skill provider. So I would say that, yes, absolutely. I think it's a different beast, and I think it is much, much harder to deal with that.
Yes, Ravneet, and this brings us back to what Professor George was talking about. We have a different mission, and therefore we need to be concerned about that as well. Yes, Professor Srivastava.
Yeah, I totally accept our universities can be very well named as or treated as par with the corporate sector. How? Why? See, those days have gone of thinking about running an university just a temple of learning. Unless the leader has the quality of managerial quality, he or she cannot successfully run the organization, in turn create leaders. Of course, objectives may be different. As business people, they can think about adapting ethical and unethical as well. And the target is getting profit and earning money. In university as well, nowadays, we give a lot of importance for decision making, participating management, skill development, organization structure. These are all we draw from corporate sector as well. But the outcome is different. as said by Professor George, see, the form of publication, in the form of patent, whatever we come out in terms of product and services, we give it to the society and to a common man. We call it as lab to land. Our ultimate aim is not to just sell and derive money out of it, but to give our findings and discoveries to the common man, even to the needy people. Then only the society can respect the education institutions. The society can acknowledge the work or contribution given by the leader of the university as well. So leader should be a person of having the quality of managerial quality of corporate sector. At the same time, expecting the outcome need not be like a corporate sector, but like a quality product in names of our own students and graduates should be readily available to meet up the global challenge as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Srivastava. The next set of questions that we have with us is about you. All of you have touched upon your own personal experiences, but maybe if you can pinpoint some of the initiatives that you've had pre-pandemic or during the pandemic times regarding inculcating leadership skills or providing the exposure to the young faculty. So initiatives at your institution would be something that would be interesting for us and our audience. Yes, we'll start with Susan again.
Thank you, Anamika. So I think there are a range of initiatives we have. So I'd like to start by saying that this notion of growing your faculty is so important, isn't it? And I'm not sure that we're all doing it as well as we should be. So I think we've got a lot more to learn in this space. And it's partly some of the things you said by increasing the value of management and leadership, because I think sometimes junior faculty or young faculty or early career academics, and forgive me for using this language, but get a bit dumped on with the administration, and then their outputs suffer. And I think that there is quite a bit of that happens in organizations, and we have to be really mindful of the personal and professional development of those staff. So there's something about valuing them as individuals, understanding career development, personal and professional development, having good appraisal systems, having good mentoring systems, good coaching systems, shadowing systems, and then of course programs. And I would include in those programs a range, including those that foster diversity and inclusion and make sure that perhaps representatives from groups who don't always put themselves forward for leadership and management come forward. We know, for example, and forgive me for this example, but women tend not to put themselves forward for things as much as men do, or they expect that they have to fill all of the criteria, whereas men will put themselves forward with fewer, and we know the research supports that, for example. So at Hull, we have a range of initiatives that people can engage in, but it is about the culture, and it's about an inclusive culture, and it's about the culture that fosters that engagement and that understanding of the strategic mission of the university and how you can contribute through a variety of means, including taking leadership at all sorts of levels. And I think those are the kind of the critical pieces for me. But I would also say that I think we've got more to do. And my director of HR yesterday and I met to talk about how do we create a matrix of opportunities for people at all levels. And that's something that we're exploring. And certainly I would put that out today, that if there are others who would like to explore that with us, I would be really welcome to have those conversations.
Yes, Susan, thank you very much. Yes, Professor George, your comments.
Yes, thank you. So I teach leadership classes in the doctoral programs at Kansas State University and San Diego State University. And in fact, I was halfway through teaching an in-person class when the lockdown for the pandemic occurred. So we had to shift very quickly and scramble to midway through a course to figure out a way to finish it. But I have to say that the universities very quickly established professional development programs for the faculty to make those transitions and to teach more effectively online. So I applaud what the universities were able to do. I was also scheduled to do a consulting project myself to do leadership team development at South Central College in Minnesota, another one of our states. And then the pandemic hit. So we had to scramble to do it virtually. But it worked pretty well, and it worked well because the leader of the institution really gave it emphasis and made it her program. And I would like to say that I think that's very important for the leader of an institution for these homegrown professional development or leadership development programs to take an active part in it. Sometimes we hear some pushback about the leadership development programs. People might say, well, why should we spend all this money developing our people when they're just going to go off to another university or another college? But I have a friend, Don Cameron, who does a lot of professional development. And he said, well, what if you don't spend the money and develop them and they stay? So just think about what you can do for your own leadership at a college through these professional development programs. And a lot of them during the pandemic have to be done in a different way.
Yes, Professor George. Ravneet?
So I think, Anamika, it's really important to think about, the pressure that young leaders in universities have, and how one can actually build on their expertise and their passion. We had to move 65,000 students studying at Deakin University online, in 24 hours around the world, because we have, we have students, sort of everywhere, and then especially in Australia because of on campus. Now, the biggest issue was also for the faculty. How do you motivate and keep them abreast with technology, to be able to use technology to the fullest of its needs and continuously challenge their minds and their skills, and give them the environment that actually makes them be able to learn and deliver. So I think, and at the same time, academic freedom, maintain academic freedom, and also diversity and inclusiveness. Now, those are the difficult challenges, I think, that we found at Deakin University, to be able to do. I think we at the university, we've got both professional as well as academic leadership programs, and it's all in a rotational basis. So, for example, you nominate yourself for positions, and then you go through interviews, and then if you make it, great. If you don't, then you have mentorship programs that can help you achieve what you want to achieve. So we've got program leaders, area leaders, cohort leaders. We're looking at demonstrating commitment to growth through the various programs, both internally and externally, that you can opt for. Team building exercises, engagement, and also I think innovation to also de-link the leadership positions to hierarchy, really, and at the same time keeping it transparent, with clear communications and feedback. One of the things that we have found very challenging in the pandemic is international collaborations and partnerships, and how people can continue to keep the passion and the need to build those partnerships, because previously people would travel. That would be a great incentive, and also meet people, develop these partnerships and collaborations, which have become an integral part of our internationalization strategy, whether it is curriculum, or it is students, or it is programs, or it is ideas. But with the pandemic, on one side, yes, we are talking now people from all over the world, but on the other side, researchers have not been able to do what they would have done in a real environment. So how do you give them the tools and the skills to continue to learn and to grow? And I think, like George said, it is not going to be easy in the future as well. I think it's going to be a different world. So we have to make sure that universities are places where people feel comfortable, upgrading their skills, and upgrading their thoughts, their ideas, being challenged enough, and to be able to deliver continuously, because it's a long journey. I mean, academic journey is not, like, you would know that, it's not an easy one, you know. It's a long, difficult journey, but at the same time, it keeps you going because you are passionate about it, you know, and you want to be a part of the change process. And I think it's really important for institutions to provide that that base, that platform, and that the tools that can build on that. And Susan talked about women in leadership and talked about women, you know, in workplace. Again, I mean, I think we've, you know, as a university, taken a lot of measures to make sure that women get equal opportunity and feel supported, and more so in pandemic times. But it is difficult because, you know, job securities are one question, and moving forward with the change of everything, you know, is another aspect as well.
Yes, Ravneet, very, very important and relevant points there. Mentorship program has been very useful in our universities as well, and I can at least tell from my own experience that it not only helps the mentees but also the mentors. You know, sort of
Yes.
like, you know,
Yes.
go through the process. And so absolutely, and delinking the hierarchy aspect is absolutely important, because you can't be, you know, you can't just replicate a boss and a sort of a, you know, agent model when you are sort of guiding or let's say working with colleagues in academia. Yes, Professor Srivastava, let's hear from you.
Yeah, basically, we need not to see all our universities and education students think about producing graduates. Almost all our programs should be of holistic personality development of our students. It is very relevant to mention here. Once Mahatma Gandhi was invited by Rabindranath Tagore, the Shantiniketan. That time Mahatma Gandhi made an attempt to define which are all the really financial good education institution. I quote, the functions of education institution need not merely to send out professionally qualified and academically competent graduates, but to produce in them a quality of compassion, determination, dedication. Basically, in the pandemic situation, in my university, we are able to produce such quality among our students. I would like to narrate two incidences. Number one, when we were facing the first wave, almost March, April, like that, there was some sorts of hesitation from the public to take the vaccination. Very big hesitation. They are very much afraid of taking vaccination. And unfortunately, few cases also, casualty cases also came after vaccination. And that time, our mentors, I requested all our mentors to educate our student friends. Let them go to the public. Let them visit all the houses in their own places. Educate them, giving awareness about them, the importance of vaccination. Can you believe? Likewise, there are many universities underwent the process. Today, the people are waiting in queue for several miles and for getting vaccination. So that much of awareness was able to do by my students. I'm not telling about the work, but when you give opportunity to student, definitely they will be very useful to the community. Simultaneously, their leadership also gaining lot. Likewise, one more thing, in India, of course, in other countries as well, during pandemic, there was a very big economic setback. Of course, the people, affordable people, they are able to be somewhat comfortable. The people of the margin level income people, they found it difficult even for 3-time food as well, because no vacation, no business, nothing. That time, again, my students launched a program of providing food for needy people, collected money through online and distributed food packets to all the needy people of nearby area. That shows the concern for the youngsters towards the common cause. Indirectly, I see that also helped them to develop their leadership skill, in due course, when they become sometimes politicians, sometimes rulers, sometimes vice chancellors, definitely this type of cultivating good habit will be much useful to them as well.
Yes. Yes, Professor Srivastava. Thank you for that. And now we have some questions from our live audience. And this has been a very popular round. So we've got some questions for, so I'll just pick some of them. We don't have time for all. Um, there's a quick one here that what change in your leadership style, maybe like one example from your own experience, you had to make during the pandemic, and it could be a change, or it could be like sort of overemphasis on certain things that you were doing, sort of continuity of certain leadership style that you felt particularly relevant during the time of pandemic. So I'll start with Susan. Yes.
Thank you. I'm not sure that my leadership style changed, in that the characteristics that I discussed before are still there. But as my fellow panelists have said, the way we behave has to change. So in order to be agile and responsive to the crisis, as I mentioned, in the very beginning, we had to go online rapidly. So that required a command and control way of being. What's the strategy? What's the focus? What's the priority? How are we going to do that? That's something that I had never experienced before. I don't think any of us had experienced that before. And so for me, it was about making those decisions very rapidly. And of course, there are times we all have to make decisions rapidly, but those were specifically incredibly rapid. And it was about how you communicate that effectively with your staff, how you support them through that process, and how you enable them to succeed. So I think they were all the same things, but perhaps in a very heightened space of time.
Yes, Susan. George.
I think one of the most important leadership competencies is communication, and in particular, oral, written, and listening. Communication skills are critically important. And I think it's especially true during the pandemic. Whenever there is uncertainty, like there is in a crisis, people need to hear that communication from the leader more than ever. So I would rate that as the most important.
Absolutely. Ravneet.
I totally agree with George and Susan. I think it was about being empathetic and being agile, and of course there were difficult decisions to be made, whether they were financial decisions or they were, people sort of impact decisions, with jobs and security and change. So I think communicating more was one thing that changed. It was communicating clearly, being more empathetic, looking at rapidly changing situations, and dealing with those situations as you dealt with them, and then also being conscious of the fact that lives were being impacted by those decisions heavily, whether they were student decisions or they were staff decisions. So I think that being resilient to be able to deal with all that was difficult.
Yes, Professor Srivastava.
The good leader should have knowledge about empathy. During pandemic, the students, they found very difficult to remit the tuition fees and other fees to the university. Okay. At the same time, the leader is in between management and the students. Management wants the money to be collected, then only in turn we can give salary to the faculty as well. So now, as a leader of the institution, he must be very neutral and understand the situation of the students, because banks, they stopped giving loan, and their parents, they lost their job, and some of the parents, they have not opened their business, totally dry. And at the same time, a leader should understand the reality, ground reality, and to see that he must be able to advise the management and be able to maintain very good financial administration. That is number one. Number two, as said by Mr. Charge, a leader should have a very good communication, especially during the pandemic. For information, In India, I think it's the same case with other, by chance, other countries as well. We have 2 or 3 secretaries in our office. All the time, those secretaries only attend all our communication of any nature. But the Vice Chancellor, we people are having very lesser knowledge about technology, mail checking, mail sending and all. But now I come to know a leader or a Vice Chancellor should be thorough in making use of all technological devices. That will be much useful all time, including pandemic situation as well.
Yes, wonderful, wonderful. So I think we have time for one last question and then we can wrap this up. And this has been my personal question, so I have a bias to put this up. Universities is a unique organization. It has concentration of talent throbbing with ideas. So when we are thinking of, let's say, nurturing leaders of the future, we need to sort of balance between because they're also critical thinkers. So the faculty, the managers, they're critical thinkers, and we sort of would like to inculcate critical thinking in our employees and in our faculty members and in our in our managerial cadre as well. So how do we sort of balance between the idea of criticality, which should be ideally there within our employees, with the idea of compliance and sort of like, promoting and sort of an alignment with the larger leadership goals and of course the economic, persuasions that we have. So I'll start with Susan.
That's a really good question. So thank you for that question. I mean, for me, there are a couple of things, and we've talked quite a lot through this evening about the different qualities that leaders need. And I think those issues of integrity, of compassion, of care, but of reflection and thought, as well as linked to the clear strategy and the mission of the university, encourages that criticality and that self-reflection. Because if you know what your mission is, if you know what you're passionate about and where you're headed, you should be thoughtful with others about how you're going to get there. And actually, we know that working as part of a team, and that's a really important part of being a good leader, empowering your teams, is about diverse discussion about how are we best going to realize our objectives, how are we best going to realize our mission. So let's harness that criticality for constructive and positive benefit, for the education of our students, for our research that impacts society, for solving those global challenges that we all face. So I see it as a really positive element of the way in which one leads successfully an organization.
Absolutely, Susan. I think it's about channelizing that energy in the right direction, sort of. Yeah. Yes, George.
So on the compliance part of the question, I think it's important that everybody understands the mission of the institution and its vision for the future, and that strategic plans need to be aligned with the mission and the vision, and how the money is spent, and how the institution is evaluated. But within the structure of the university or the college, people need academic freedom. And as Susan made that point earlier, we need to, as leaders, create a safe environment where people feel free or feel safe to speak their mind and to engage in discussions that are critical and often in disagreement with each other. But that's how we make the best decisions at our institutions, is to listen to different points of view and take everybody's point of view into consideration. So I don't necessarily see the compliance part in direct opposition to the critical thinking part. I think we can live within the compliance part and still encourage critical thinking and open debate and a safe environment.
Ravneet.
So I think I totally agree with both the speakers. I think they've answered the question beautifully. I think with the future leaders, you talk about the skills that you want them to have, collaboration, critical thinking, problem solving, effective communication, strategic planning, being nimble, change management, commitment to diversity, resilience, intellectual curiosity. And, those are things that we inculcate in our people, and we as leaders look at inculcating those in students as well. So I think those are sort of where the critical thinking comes from. And I think the compliance is, like George said, it is about having a clear mission, a vision, values of the institute, and then consultative process of strategic planning and implementation, and then taking it to the very minutest part of the university. For example, if it's a faculty, the faculty plan must give consideration to people to put into their thoughts, their requests, and to be able to make a difference. So that, because see, if there are 4,000 employees, you have to feel that you can make a difference and you matter. So, you put in your thoughts, that becomes a part of the whole planning. And then when it's released and it's implemented, you automatically feel that you're engaged and that it is your plan. So I think, and so compliance then becomes that much more easier. So of course, there needs to be clarity of thought when you are looking at compliance and when you are building the structure and the framework for compliance. So clarity of thought and dissemination of information to everyone and a buy-in from everyone is important, I think.
Yes, and that goes back to the communication part. So yeah. Yes, Professor Srivastava.
Yeah, when you think about critical thinking and all, as listed by our friends, I can add one more. The capacity building is most vital. The capacity building in the sense, unless you get the confidence of your own main stakeholders of faculty, you cannot be successful. So whatever as said by Professor George, see the vision and the mission of the leader of the institution need not be of his own, and he must be able to see that are to be accepted by, or rather to accommodated by the leader, and then only the overall aim of the institution will be achieved. Participating management is the most vital aspect in all variables, starting from designing curriculum and providing facilities and making use of their work for administration, everything. Ultimately, a leader should be a facilitator and the leader should be a role model. Then only any organization can be successful. Thank you.
Yes, what a note to end this very, very relevant session. And I think the best part is that we were talking about going bottom up, and and we have the we have leaders from various universities talking about it, and the most important aspects that we raised was about continuity of genuine, authentic, empathetic leadership, and also keeping an eye on how to keep our universities stay afloat. So these are the two aspects we need to sort of balance that out. And thank you very much for this wonderful session. And yes, this session is ended. Thank you very much.